Hey guys, my guest tonight, John LeMay, is going to be talking about witches in New Mexico. Be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Happy Wednesday, everybody. How's everybody doing? Okay, I think I heard you say good. As you can tell, I still have my squeaky chair. We're working on it. Hopefully, somebody will gift me with a new chair. A gamer's chair. Red and black, of course. Anyway, my name is Charlotte, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal need, or you think you have a paranormal need, we can help you. It just might take us a while to get to you. You know, a lot of people, when they think of us here in California, they got the lands of fruits and nuts. But besides that, they think of us like Hawaii. California girls on the beach, right? You know, people hanging out on bonfires and making s'mores and all that stuff on the beach. Well, we are like that, but that's just one little portion of our southern and northern and west things. We have big cities, we have deserts, we have mountains, Sierra Nevada mountains, right? We have mountains. We've got a lot of farmland and low-lying areas. It was weird because when I had a house, or when my family and I had a house up past Mount Shasta, it was always a weird sinking feeling in my stomach because technically we were in the shadow of Mount Shasta. We were on the edge, the plateau going into the mountains. I mean, 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away, you were in like major mountains over by Mount Shasta, Mount Rainier, all that area. And, well, actually Mount Hood, Oregon. But, because we were right on the Oregon border. But when we used to come down the freeway, and we hit a certain part coming down, all of a sudden, all you do, as your car is kind of pointed this way, next thing you see is nothing but flatland, you know? And my first thought was the Valley of the Moon or Death Valley, because it's usually old dry. It's usually old golden, but that's how we got the Golden State thing here, you know? But anyway, I remember that sinking feeling coming home because I look down and I think, oh man, we're not in the mountains anymore. I just love the mountains. So I miss going up there. So hopefully now that I'm going to be doing some fishing, I'll get the opportunity to go to different places and maybe go trout fishing and some other things this year. So you guys get to go along, so don't forget that. Okay, today my guest, John LeMay, has been on before, and I'm really fascinated by the topic. He just wrote a book called The Book of Witches in New Mexico. If I have it wrong, I have the book. I'll fix it. But it's an interesting book to me for a lot of reasons, and I'll get into that during the show. In the meantime, if you're watching from Facebook and you like what you see, please feel free to hit that follow button because we're trying to look for followers. And also, chat amongst yourselves in the chat room. And again, if you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. Show me a heart. I can't even do these things. I'm still trying to figure out. It's kind of like Mr. Spock and live long and prosper, right? Just can't get this heart thing going. So, show me some love, right? YouTube, same thing. We have over 950 videos sitting over there, and I like to change it up, right? Because I'm a journalist, photojournalist, and so I don't like to cover the same type of things all the time. So what you're going to see over there is you're going to see stuff on the opioid crisis. You're going to see stuff on famous murders. Everything you can think of under the sun. And then what I've done, because there's so many videos, and it's hard to you go on that page and your eyes bulge. It does to me. So I've started to put everything into categories. So if you're interested in cryptids, you can go directly there. If you're interested in witches, you can go there, like with tonight's show. Or, cowboys and vampires. Remember this the last time John was on Cowboys and Vampires. We talked about werewolves. And if you're into Medium Nancy Matz, she's got her own folder. So, you'll find all kinds of stuff over there. But the only thing I ask of you again, because most of these social places work the same. So, thumbs up, happy faces, things like that, and comment in the chat room. Because the master computers at all these places see that, and they distribute us out to more people. which is really cool, right? I mean, I can see that happening the last 2 months where our numbers have just exploded over on the RSS feed because this stuff is getting distributed out. And I'm really, really excited about it. So let's see if we can keep up that good work and share it, okay? I mean, you might have somebody sitting next to you who's going to be going into their bedroom or whatever after dinner, you know? That would be a good time to say, hey, there's this little show that I listen to, you know, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that being said, if you hear a noise in the background, I don't know how loud it is or how faint it is, but it is 90 degrees today, so it's an air conditioner kind of day, and I have a through a window air conditioner in here. So if you hear it, I apologize. When I was listening to the intro, it didn't sound too bad, you know, when I went back to do the editing on the intro. So hopefully that'll work for you guys. Okay, all right. Okay, well, any updates I have? Yeah, we are going to be doing a watch party at 8 p.m. Friday Pacific. For creature features, and for people that are my age, we know what creature features is. They've kind of brought it back. For people who aren't my age, creature features is a place for years and years where they showed like grade B and C movies, but they're charming little movies, and so they've started it back up in the last couple of years. So every night practically there's a movie, but the main nights are Friday and Saturday. So I decided it'd be kind of cool to do watch parties after the show, because after I get off the show, that's where I head. It's all on YouTube. I watch creature features. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to get together after the show and do a watch party. No charge, just grab some popcorn, snacks, sit back, and slide into the weekend watching horror movies, right? So that'll be happening Friday. They have not announced what the Friday show is going to be, which is why I haven't announced where we can watch together. I do have a online place where I can program everything in there, and we can watch it together and talk amongst ourselves. So as soon as I get information on what the next film is going to be, I will definitely get that up and started, and we can have a nice happy Friday. And if my sister's listening, yes, I have ho-hos, I have ice water, and I definitely have popcorn for Friday. So nothing changes. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to bring my guest in. Oh, also, before I forget, too much going on, I will be teaching a ghost hunting 101 class, not this Saturday, but a week from Saturday, and that will be online here at StreamYard, actually, here through StreamYard. And if you guys are interested in that, I'll have all the details started around 10 o'clock tonight. I'll have it all set up at the meetup. And if this is a way for you to learn how to ghost hunt properly, kind of like I do, you don't have to do exactly what I do, but you can kind of get the gist and have a real successful ghost hunt, even if you're somebody that just wants to pop in and ghost hunt for fun. I mean, you can do all that. So we're going to be doing that. The other thing I'm going to be doing is, normally I'm teaching psychic development classes, but I've decided, because I do have a meditation club where you can come and meditate 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And, it's kind of fun to do that. So what I thought would be fun was to get us all together for a meditation session. And it would be a private session with probably 8 other people, right? And we'd have this session, and I would teach you how to go see your spirit guides, how to meet your spirit guides, how to see your spirit object, how to see your spirit animal, and your spirit message. So I'm going to set up a day for that. And if you guys are interested in that, come on over to the California Haunts meetup tonight, because I'm going to set all that stuff up tonight after I get off the air here. And I think it'll be a really cool event. If anything, it'll teach you how to meditate if you don't meditate. But a lot of people haven't met their spirit guides or anything like that. So this is a way for them to get to meet them. Okay, I'm going to bring John in. I'm going to shut up now. I'm out of breath. I'm going to bring John in, and we get the show on the road, because John is a really, really fascinating guy. Here we go.
Hello, Charlotte. Do I sound presentable?
You do.
Good. All right.
It is so good to have you back.
I enjoyed it last time I was on, so I was excited when you asked me to come back.
Tell everybody, for the people that don't know who you are, let's get a nice little bio synopsis.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Roswell, New Mexico. Of course, the town where the aliens crashed. And yes, I believe it. Yes, I've met some witnesses. And yes, I've written books on that too. But tonight, we're going to delve more into the folklore and things like that I like to write about. But I'm actually up to about 50 books now, believe it or not.
Wow.
And I still barely make any money, but I make enough to get by, so I'm thankful.
And you're learning a lot, doing the research. That's what's
I
important.
learned, wow. So tonight's book, the New Mexico Book of Witches, I think taught me more than just about any other book I ever wrote.
what surprised you the most, during your research?
I think just everything. I had gotten inklings of how different New Mexico's witches were versus, like, say, the witches of Salem, Massachusetts, and all that.
Hmm.
Um, they're not like in the movies. New Mexico witches, they don't really ride brooms, despite what I have on the cover. It was just a good
Right.
image. I had to grab it. But New Mexico witches, they turn into fireballs, or they turn into owls, or they turn into pumpkins that float. They're very different from, like you're saying, the traditional image of the witch and the Wizard of Oz and all that.
I never heard about some of that stuff. Where the pumpkins and fireballs. Where is, when you look at New Mexico, and I know when my grandmother migrated in from Mexico, my grandfather, they ended up on a reservation, and they were cutting the Native American hair, and so she came back with different chants that she used to sing to me when I was a kid, and stuff like that. Where do you think for these witches the influence is coming from? Is it coming from the native, from the medicine men for the native, for the Native Americans, or is some of that coming over from Mexico?
I don't even know how we should define the word witch anymore, because to the Spaniards, a medicine man was a witch, quote unquote, but I wouldn't call a medicine man a witch.
Right.
Um, to me, what it boils down to is whether a person is manifesting something with hatred and negativity and fear, versus if they manifest
Hmm.
something good like healing or whatever out of love or benevolence. They're just different types of manifestation that we call magic. And I
Right.
actually don't think there's any such thing as magic. I think it's just kind of a weird science we don't understand yet, but it seems like magic. So that is kind of what the book taught me, just reading all these different stories, because for the people that are actually watching, you can see this is a pretty thick book, and the
Hmm.
font is actually fairly small too. It's not
Yeah.
big font or anything. There is a lot to New Mexico's history in terms of witchcraft, and some of it's not really witchcraft, but it's what the Spaniards called witchcraft. Some of
Hmm.
it really was, I guess what you call traditional witchcraft, where people were casting spells to do harm on other people and things like that.
Hmm.
But again, some of it was just medicine men trying to heal and things like that. So yeah, probably
I
the
just
most
find,
scholarly book, yeah, I've ever done.
yeah, I find, in fact, I read the book. I find the book to be very interesting.
Thank you.
I find stuff like that to be interesting. And like when you say the image of a witch has changed quite a bit. I mean, because when you look at Wicca, some of that is because I have a couple of friends that are in covens right now, and a lot of that is nature. A lot of this stuff is nature.
Well, I thought so. The Apache belief system taught me a lot,
Hmm.
because it kind of, in an odd way, reminded me of Judaism, because it didn't have a Christ figure, but it had only one God, and then it has mountain spirits, which are kind of comparable to angels, I guess.
Hmm.
But my eye opener in reading about the Apaches is they would go on a 4-day fast to try and commune with Usan, which is their name for
Hmm.
God. And
Hmm.
after 4 days, they would be given what they called the power, which is a lot like the Force in Star Wars. They would
Hmm.
come back with unique abilities, be it premonition, or if you like look up Geronimo's supernatural powers, like later,
Hmm.
you'll see he had some really interesting stuff. Allegedly, he could like slow down time and do different things. And yeah, so it's a lot of interesting stuff at play.
Now, like you say, when you term witch, because I mean, automatically people think, like the broomstick and the Wizard of Oz witch and all this going on. What like you talk about, the Apache. What surprised you the most in your research? What stood out to you?
Hmm. I think my opinion of the Apache was
Okay.
obviously God connected with them.
Mhm.
So I don't I'm not one of those who says, oh well, those Apaches, the devil was communicating with them. That's the old mindset. To me, just looking at what they did, it's very clear to me that the Apache connected to God in
Mhm.
their own unique way, and God favored them with uh, some unique supernatural abilities because a lot of them really could tell the future, and they would use that to their advantage to evade um, the U.S. Soldiers that were always out to round them up and put them on reservations.
Very interesting. And how long did it take you to research this book? Because I mean, you obviously had to get some stuff to go way back with it.
So I'm not sure when I got the idea to do the book,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a lot of New Mexico history books, and all of them touch on witchcraft in New Mexico in some small way. And I just kept seeing all these different stories that were so interesting, and I thought, it is just crazy. Nobody's done a book
Mm-hmm.
on the history of witchcraft in New Mexico. And I thought, well, if nobody else is going to do it, I'll give it a try.
Awesome. Can you share some of those stories with us?
Gosh, I think the one that I really gravitated toward was that of Pecos Pueblo because it has a monster involved, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So supposedly at Pecos Pueblo, they kept a giant rattlesnake. It's kind of like a deity like Quetzalcoatl,
Mm-hmm.
and people really ascertained that this was a real living creature that they kept for many years until I guess it escaped and slithered away and swam off in the river, is the story. And Pecos also has a legend of the eternal flame. They had kind of, I don't know what I call it. It's kind of like a Pueblo Christ figure
Mm-hmm.
that people mistakenly call Montezuma. That's not his name, but colloquially he's known as Montezuma. So supposedly Montezuma had all these, unique powers, and kind of like Christ, he ascended into the
Mm-hmm.
sky, and he claimed that one day he would return, and all the Pueblo people would always watch for him at
Mm-hmm.
sunrise every morning for many, many years, and that tradition apparently has died out. But before he left, he lit some kind of an eternal flame down in one of the Pueblos. So that's just another one of those really
Mm-hmm.
fascinating, interesting stories.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about pumpkins and things like that, like you did in the beginning, can you elaborate on that stuff?
Yeah, again, I don't think I probably only found one story where a witch rode a broom in New
Mm-hmm.
Mexico. Every other time, uh, they would they wouldn't turn into a pumpkin. So the story would typically be that someone is watching a gathering of witches from afar, and the witches would cut a hole into the top of the pumpkin, kind of like a jack o' lantern, take the top off. Then they would shrink down to a tiny little size like fairies, and they would hop into the pumpkin, and then the pumpkin would take off and fly with
Hmm. That's really cool, though. That's really cool. Were you able to interview? I mean, you did all this research. Were you able to interview any actual people practicing witchcraft at all?
them. No, and I tried to write the book in a neutral sort of way, so that way
Mm-hmm.
church people wouldn't get mad about it, and then
Mm-hmm.
witches wouldn't get mad about it, because I didn't want to make any witches mad at me. So I just kind of wrote this as a very basic history
Mm-hmm.
where I just say, this is what happened. I'm not saying anything else. This is just the events as they happened. But I'll say again, my own beliefs are that yes, these things are possible. They're not silly, made up stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think people can do what they say they can do, and again, how I define whether or not it's good or bad is if it's manifested through fear and negativity and evil, it's bad. If it's manifested through good and love, then it's good.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to think whatever helps you believe, it
Mm-hmm.
generates a feeling in you, and that feeling is an energy, and that energy is the thing that really matters.
Now, what is the difference when we talk about this? Because you mentioned there is a difference between the witches of Salem
Hmm.
and New Mexico. What is the main difference there?
I think it's just a cultural thing because all the witches in New Mexico, they're a really interesting blend of Native American magic that
Mm-hmm.
commingled with the Spanish colonialists for like hundreds of years until they just totally intertwined. Because I don't think witches like at Salem turned into balls of fire like New Mexico
Right.
witches did.
Right.
And New Mexico witches too. They would say they turned into owls a lot.
Hmm.
And probably the most common folk tale was that a sheep herder would be out late at night. He'd see an owl up in a tree, and he'd think it was spying on him, so he shoots the owl.
Hmm.
And the next day, they find the woman they suspected of being a witch, dead in her home mysteriously. And that's a very common folk tale.
Hmm.
And Charlotte, something I do is I tried to think, if this really happened, how did it happen?
Hmm.
Because most people, they either just blindly believe it. They're like, well, it happened and it's just magic and that's the way it is. And other
Hmm.
people will be like, well, it just didn't happen. There's no sense thinking about it. But I really tried to think about it. This whole thing with the owls, because there's so many stories
Hmm.
about people turning into owls and getting shot. And I thought, they have stories about people being possessed, right, by demons and things like that. I don't see why a witch couldn't be knowledgeable enough and talented enough to make themselves have an out of body experience and
Hmm.
then go possess an animal like an owl. I don't see why that couldn't be possible, especially when so many people can attest to like astral projection and things like that.
Hmm.
So I just thought, maybe that's really what happened. Maybe certain people back then actually were skilled enough they could have these out of body experiences and maybe possess an animal. So, maybe they didn't really turn into an animal, but maybe they did leave their body and go possess it. And
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, hey, who knows how the science of that works? And if you got shot while you weren't in your own body, I mean,
Right.
I don't know. Who knows?
Now, as we talk about this and having that ability, do you think a lot of these witches, in the old days were psychic? That they had psychic abilities?
Yes, and I think we're all psychic. We just don't know how to utilize it, and some people are afraid of it. But I bet everybody listening has kind of sort of read somebody's mind before, and they just wrote it off as, oh, that's just coincidence or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
Because I have some pretty talented friends. They can read my mind. They always know what I'm thinking, and it's something totally off the wall. They could never guess. So I've seen it a lot. I think we're all psychic. We just not everybody knows how to use it. That's my opinion.
Right. Question from the chat room: are most witches in New Mexico of the indigenous culture?
So the ones in my book definitely were. They were predominantly always Spanish or Mexican or, and I guess I should clarify for people who don't understand, when you say Spanish versus Mexican, what that means is if you're Spanish, especially back in like the 1700s, that means you're from Spain, and
Hmm.
you're purely of Spanish blood. But when the Spanish mixed with the Aztec and the indigenous people of Mexico, that's what you call Mexicans. And then you have, of course, Anglos, which are the European settlers.
Hmm.
So yeah, New Mexico, all the witches were typically always Native American, Spanish, or Mexican.
Hmm. And in your research, as far as these witches go, is this something that's passed down generation to generation? Like, my mother was a witch, therefore I'm a witch because I have those skills I learned from my mother, or they just happen to come out?
So yeah, I think they were taught. But again, my belief. So some of the, you'd have to read the book, or well, you read the book, Charlotte.
I read the book,
Some
yeah,
of these, yeah, some of
yeah.
these customs are so silly, and I'm not saying they didn't happen, but
Hmm.
there's this thing where people named Juan or Juana, they have these special witch catching abilities where they can draw a circle in the dirt and they can catch a witch as it flies through the air. And kind of the same with the witches. It's like, okay, if I throw this in the cauldron with this and this and this, I can make this happen. Again, I really think anytime somebody does a ritual, I don't know how important the components of the ritual are versus the fact that they do these things make them believe that it's going to happen. And again, I think belief is an energy.
Mhm.
And so if you were taught, okay, throw this in the throw the frog's leg, whatever, in there, and get a hair from the guy or the girl you like and throw it in there.
Mhm.
Again, I don't know that I think it really matters. I think it just makes the human being believe so hard that I
Mhm.
think they can manifest these things. That's what makes the most sense to me with all of the world's different religions and cultures, because they all have their miracles, and that's what makes the most sense to this point. And this book definitely opened my eyes to that.
Makes a lot of sense. The other question I had too, like I said, I did read the book, but I'm trying to bring this stuff out to them.
Yeah.
How was, I mean, because you look at what happened in Salem, when they started pointing the fingers at the so-called witches, how were they received here as far as
hmm
the Old West goes?
So I think publicly, if you were like a Spaniard or an Anglo or whatever, you would publicly probably decry a witch and denounce them, but secretly you might go and visit them and be like, I really like this girl. Can you make me a love potion? Or I really like this guy. Will you make me a love potion so I
Mm-hmm.
can attract them?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, privately, I think a lot of people consulted witches, especially and predominantly for love magic. That was the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was. I would say it was very common back then.
Michelle from the chat has a question. She says, I was in Taos visiting the Pueblo there, and it had a very beautiful but intense vibe.
hmm
Was there a lot of witches there in large numbers?
Yeah, Taos has some interesting stuff to it, and I find people that get energy from places really interesting. I can get energy from people. I've
Mm-hmm.
never been one to get energy from places, so I think that's interesting. So Taos, okay. I have a friend who says the same thing. She doesn't like to go to Taos. She's very sensitive to the energy there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Taos. Taos's big thing was the Pueblo Revolt of 1680.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, everybody wants to make somebody the good guy and somebody the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, gosh, what am I trying to say? Okay, well, I'll just tell the story of the Pueblo Revolt and we'll go
Sure.
from there. So, obviously at that time, the Spaniards had come into New Mexico. They had totally subjugated the Native American population. They viewed their beliefs as totally just horrible, pagan, awful, didn't let them do anything. Even the peaceful stuff, because there were certain Native American practices that were violent. I mean, the Aztecs obviously were very violent. They were cutting each other's hearts out. So, um, there wasn't anything that bad up here in New Mexico, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of the Native American practices here were pretty peaceful by comparison. And again, the Spanish just subjugated them and forbade them from practicing, their own religion and all that. So, naturally, after a while, the Native American population got mad and they rebelled.
Mm-hmm.
And they were organized under a shaman named Pope. And Pope was really ingenious because he used the belief system of the Spanish against them.
Mm-hmm.
And he claimed that he was consulting with the deceased spirit of Montezuma, the dead Aztec emperor,
Mm-hmm.
the Native Americans were successful in driving the Spaniards out. And I think it was August of 1680. They didn't come back until like 1690, so they kicked them out for a whole decade.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess why I said, there was no good guys or bad guys necessarily, as Pope, once he did take control, was really just as bad as the Spaniards, because he started killing people as well. He was just as forceful as the Spaniards were in what he forced on the people once he was in control. So, and I think that's really the story of our world. Most of us, the little people, we're good people, but our leaders are always fighting, and they're usually the bad ones. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the Native Americans deserved to be free from the Spanish. I
Mm-hmm.
guess my point was just that Pope, the guy who organized the revolt, he really didn't end up being that much better than the Spanish, unfortunately.
Very, and the other thing I find interesting about this whole thing is that there's, I mean, the amount of witches that were out there.
Yeah.
Out there practicing. Now, whether they were doing good magic, black magic, or whatever they were doing, I mean, there was a lot out there, and so there wasn't the big roundups like there was during the Salem times.
Yeah. And I have to apologize to our listeners. I wrote this book, I don't even know, a year ago, 2 years ago now, and now I'm on to the next book, so it's like I forget what all. If it was
Okay.
fresh, I could be telling all these neat stories. I'll tell one that I think our
Okay.
listeners will like. It's just
Okay.
so
Sure.
bizarre. In the year 1940, this was in the newspapers. It's not a folk tale. In 1940, a man was arrested by the state police of New Mexico for turning into a frog and biting his wife. Like it's in the court transcripts and everything. Like the wife was dead serious. Yes, he turned into a frog and he bit me, and and she had wounds on her body, and that was the witness testimony. It's a little village in the mountains called Mora, New Mexico. And what I thought was so interesting about that story, this was just a poor old man, and by poor I mean he wouldn't appear to have a lot of money. He's
Mhm.
basically a poor villager, and he's in the county seat in court, and the judge thought he was going to set a bail amount that he couldn't pay because he set a bail of about $1,000.
Mhm.
And when he did it, the little old man that was accused of turning into a frog, he just fairly calmly pulled out a big wad of $100 bills and counted them out, and he walked. And it turned out he had a racket going on with the villagers, kind of like how they have mob protection rackets. So
Mhm.
they would pay this man not to hex them. It was like pay me whatever amount a week and I won't hex you. And he was, making bank doing that apparently.
And you brought up a good point with him turning into a frog. And the last time I talked to you, we were talking about cowboys, we were talking about shapeshifters, we were talking
Yeah.
about all that stuff. Do you think that some of these shapeshifters that people have seen over the years could just could generate from witches?
Yeah, I really try hard to wrap my head around the shapeshifters because I have
Mhm.
no problems believing in any type of wild supernatural whatever. For me, I just wonder how would one actually really do that? That's hard to comprehend.
Mhm.
But a lot of credible people though they claim that they see the shapeshifters, which are predominantly Navajo usually.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I'll say one thing that's interesting. In the Navajo, it's called the Skinwalker, and it's always evil. But
Mhm.
the Apache sometimes, very rarely, they have shapeshifters, and
Mhm.
sometimes those are just medicine men, and they're not really regarded as bad. So I
Hmm.
don't know what the difference is. I do know with skinwalkers, apparently they say that to get their powers, they have to kill a close relative of some kind, and that's how they get their powers to do what they do.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, it makes me wonder about that. As you say that, different societies and how they look at stuff. Like for instance, like even nowadays, there's different things that are okay okay in say the society I live in, but maybe in Europe, it's a no-no.
Exactly, that's a good point. And I think you're right. And the indigenous tribes, for one tribe, this isn't bad, and for another one, this is just awful. And they were kind of some tribes hated snakes. Snakes were nothing but bad. And to other tribes, they might bring the rain or wisdom or whatever.
Question in the chat room: what is the difference between a witch, a shapeshifter, and the other one,
Is there
or
another word you're trying to
or a
read?
shaman? Yeah, what's the
Okay,
difference between a witch, shaman, and shapeshifter?
sure. Well, a shaman doesn't have to be a shapeshifter. A shaman
Mhm.
could just, be a healer, whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, they call skinwalkers, which are shapeshifters, witches. So, okay, well, this is an interesting point. Our idea of the werewolf, as we know it
Mhm.
through movies, that's just a movie thing.
Mhm.
In medieval Europe, a werewolf was a witch because nobody could be a werewolf unless they were a witch. There was
Mhm.
no concept of you got bit by a wolf and yada yada yada. You pretty much had to be a witch who did some sort of ritual to transform. So I guess you can be a shaman or a witch without being a shapeshifter, but if
Mm-hmm.
you have those powers, you can choose to be a shapeshifter. Is I guess how it could be explained.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, when was the first witch noticed in history? Because I know you did all
Hmm.
that back stuff and all that research. When was the first report of a witch?
Gosh, I don't know. I think witches probably go back to Sumeria, I would guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean they have a couple of witches, in the Bible, and of course there's plenty of things that predate the Bible. That's why I brought up Sumeria. But
Sure.
so I did do some research about what's the deal with the brooms, women,
Mm-hmm.
the women riding brooms, and that's funny. That was basically just the Catholic Church going after this rogue sect of Catholicism that allowed women to be priests. I think they were called the Wall.
Mm-hmm.
I, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but basically, yeah, that for some reason the Catholic Church portrayed these women priests as riding brooms, and because they were heretical, they called them witches. And
Mm-hmm.
and then there's also fertility rites for people's crops. Where they would like jump around on their broom or their hoe or their shovel or whatever. And somehow this whole thing of like jumping around on a broom just became the idea of a witch flying around on a broom. And I don't think there's a whole lot of real life sightings of that, especially
Mm-hmm.
not in the old days.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is something I think is interesting. When something enters the public consciousness, then it starts to be seen,
Mm-hmm.
whereas
Mm-hmm.
it was not seen in the old days. But when it gets in that public consciousness, people start to report it. And I think there's something to that that's more complex than, oh, well, people, they all just make up the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
are you a Supernatural fan? That show Supernatural at all?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
am.
I think they did an episode on manifestation, particularly the manifestation of fears and how
Mm-hmm.
people are just manifesting what they fear because that's what they believe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, even now, I mean, after all these TV shows have been on, it's always negative energy in these TV shows because that's
Hmm.
what Hollywood's going to push up.
Yeah.
But as a ghost hunter or a paranormal investigator, when I get that call on the phone, people are manifesting what they want to believe. Hey, I know it's a demon. Just come out and get rid of it, and all this other stuff. And I have to slow them down and go, look, it may not be what you think it is. You've been watching too much TV, and
Yeah.
it's not like it is on TV. Word of mouth can really screw things up.
Yeah.
Look what
Well.
happened in Salem is a perfect
Yeah.
example of what happened.
Hmm.
A lot of those women were just psychic, and a lot of them were healers, and
Yeah.
and they all got blown out.
See, now I understand that. When I was younger, I just thought, oh, well, they were witches and they were bad, and that's that.
Mhm.
Now I,
Mhm.
I do understand all the other
Mhm.
stuff that was at play and just how complex it is.
Why would someone go to a witch for help?
Well, in New Mexico, they really distinguish a lot of times between witches and the healers, which they call curanderas or curanderos if
Curanderos, yeah,
they're male. Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, most Hispanic people especially are not, they're not touchy about going to a curandera because they don't think of them as a witch. They just think of them as a healer.
Mhm. 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 So, like you said earlier, a lot of what they were doing was love spells.
Yeah.
Things like that for people. Maybe abundance spells. Hey, am I going to win this poker game? I'm going to
Yeah.
work on the gold fields. Am I going to strike gold? To get the magic from that. Was there ever anybody, or as you were looking at the reports, anybody that asked the witch to do negative things at all?
Oh yeah, a lot of it was jealousy of. I think this woman's flirting with my husband. I want you to
Mhm.
cure the measles or whatever you can think of, and yeah. So and that's why I said, I mean, if you're manifesting through hate, jealousy, and fear, it's bad, But if you're a medicine man, a curandera, a healer, and you're manifesting through love you're just trying to heal, that's different.
Here's a good question for the chat room. Do you practice witchcraft, or have you been invited to um, see any witchcraft done?
No, but that's again where I go back to my whole thing now, just after looking at the whole world, is everything is some form of manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the physicists say, everything is energy.
Mm-hmm.
Your molecules, when you break them down, are just energy that's moving around, and even though we're solid, we're just energy. So again, whatever energy you create, I don't believe in magic anymore. I think it's just kind of this, I don't know, this energy science that we don't. And I think how that works is all of our energy in the beginning was all one energy that was connected, and then it all split apart. But it's
Mm-hmm.
all kind of still connected. So I know it seems weird to think that, oh, I could send my thoughts to this other person, but I don't think it's that weird anymore.
It's like my dad had the saying when I was growing up: if you wish hard enough and you want it bad enough, your dream will come true.
Yeah. Well, another thing I had to take a hard look at was certain people would pray for things that weren't. They would pray for things that really didn't align with their religion, and they would get them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, the prayer made them believe. I know a lot of people that pray for toys in terms of cars.
Mm-hmm.
They pray, oh, I want this car so bad, this sports car, and there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, like I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it.
Right.
I'm just saying Jesus would not give you a sports car. Okay, like if you read the Jesus of the Bible, I don't think he would
Right.
give you a sports car, but I think that you prayed and you believed and you got your sports car. Nothing wrong with that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's just manifestation. You know?
Yeah. He threw that out to the universe,
Yeah.
so the universe was dealing with it. Do you think that, and, like you talked about earlier about these witches, a lot of their stuff was peaceful that they were doing. But do you think there were actually any out there that were on the darker side of witchcraft?
Yeah, most of what I have in this book is the darker stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I brought up the story about Pecos Pueblo before
Right.
about the giant rattlesnake. I didn't mention the stories go they would feed people to the rattlesnake. That's not right. Whatever you're trying to manifest, obviously that's evil, wicked, wrong to sacrifice another human being's life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the real question might be, did they actually feed people to the snake? If it even existed, are those just stories people made up?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know that, but those are the stories that are told. But yeah, most of the stuff in this book is the scary stuff. It's not a
Right.
book about curanderas,
Right.
and obviously I'm talking to the audience, not you. I know you read it, but like, yeah, just for the audience. So yeah, I know these are the bad witches. And again, that's why I said, there's it's we want to make the good guy and the bad guy, but the Spanish priests, I would not say were the good guys because they went and they forced their will on everyone and subjugated everyone, and
Right.
they didn't let them have free will. So no, they're not the good guys. And then you would have these Indian shamans that would fight against them, but unfortunately, some of those guys are pretty wicked themselves. So okay, here's my bottom line.
Okay.
People in power are usually kind of wicked. The people that want to
Mm-hmm.
rule over other people are kind of wicked.
Mm-hmm.
Us, the little people, we're usually kind of happy to ourselves. So I'm saying, the shamans and the priests are kind of similar. They
Mm-hmm.
do have this thing going on where they maybe some of them want to be in power over other people and they fight.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what I observed. There were a few instances of there was just a good shaman getting rid of the horrible priest, and just the opposite. There
Mm-hmm.
was a good priest getting rid of maybe a shaman that was indulging in horrible, human sacrifice type stuff. So it's really not black or white. It's just
Mm-hmm.
there's good people and there's bad people, and
Right.
they're not good just because they're a priest or just because they're a medicine man. It's just
Well,
we
this
like to label things so
right.
bad as people. Yeah.
And isn't that the thing throughout life? I mean, there's good and
Hmm.
bad.
Yeah.
Just like when your mother would say, "You got a good angel over here, and you got the devil over
Yeah.
here," and they're fighting it out.
Yeah.
Bad here. I mean, that's just the way it is. And you look at movies. I mean, look at Star Wars.
Yeah.
Same thing, right? You got You got the
Yeah.
dark side, and then you got the light. Then you got the people in the middle.
I think Star Wars actually has the right idea. It's a lot of it. I think we have more power than we realize and more power than
Mhm.
we're taught, and it's how we use it. And
I've
and
also,
that's yeah.
yeah, I've also always felt with Star Wars that somebody, psychic, obviously was involved with the production
Yeah.
because they write that stuff up so well.
Hmm. Well, yeah. To me, the Force is very much like the Apache power concept.
Right,
It's the
right,
exact same thing. Yeah. So
absolutely.
there, and well, that's the thing is all the religions do have similar threads. The power or the Holy Spirit or whatever you want to blame it on.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
yeah, it's like I think just not enough people take the time to actually study the world and experience the world. Not that I'm some great traveler, but
Right.
yeah,
But
yeah.
you know what's funny, especially after the first interview we did with you. What struck me was, when you hear about werewolves and shapeshifters and all these other things, it's always Europe. It's always somewhere Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
It's always someplace in Europe. And to find out that this was happening during cowboy times and stuff must
yeah,
have really been an eye opener for you.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think my thing is as a kid, I liked those monster movies, but I didn't
Right.
think of New Mexico, of course, as a place for a werewolf or a vampire. So that's
Mhm.
why I sought it out.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I mean, there's still stories even with Mexico. My mind just went blank. I was just thinking about that creature. That creature that people see all the time out there. That there's still people
Hmm.
reporting that thing between Mexico and New Mexico and Texas.
Oh, is it the chupacabra or something
That's it,
else? Or,
chupacabra. That's the
yeah.
word I'm looking for. So there's still stuff out there. And how does this stuff? I mean, you get people that, like you said earlier, the scientific types who look at all this logically,
Mhm.
and they're going to debunk it all. But how does that stuff get going to where it becomes part of the folk, the cement of the folklore?
Gosh, that's a good point. Like we were saying, it's like when it seeps into the public consciousness.
Hmm.
Okay, here's a good one. Somebody pointed out to me. They said that if you've never seen something before, your
Hmm.
brain doesn't know how to process it.
Hmm.
I think the idea is when you're a baby and a child growing up, you kind of process everything, but then you hit a certain age and you kind of quit.
Right.
And the idea is if you saw something really really strange, you couldn't process it or something.
Hmm.
So maybe some of these weird things people just can't process and they don't notice them. I
Hmm.
don't know.
Hmm. Or maybe it's just well, they can't process it. But the thing is when you see something that's weird and a shock to your brain, and your brain's trying to make sense of it, you're going to turn it into something that makes sense to you.
Yes, yeah,
The way they look, Sasquatch. That makes sense to a lot of people. Giant ape.
yeah,
Running through the woods or whatever. So I think it's how our brain takes that stuff. And I
yeah.
also Sylvia Browne had a saying in one of her books that God doesn't let you see things that are going to overwhelm you. It lets you see things that you can cope with. It lets you have those visions.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think part of this is we don't want to know everything.
Mhm.
Like we don't want to know what's behind the curtain sometimes. I don't know. It's like peeking at your presents before Christmas morning.
Right. 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 In your studies, and then we'll talk about it as a broad thing. We have this book that we're talking about, but I mean, a lot of what you've written before is related. Is related. It's kind of like a build up to this.
Hmm.
To this study over history that you've done. What creature, what types of beings stand out most to you? Is it the witches, or is it just other things like a chupacabra or anything like that?
Well, I'm still like a little kid in that I like dinosaurs. Any
Okay.
dinosaur type cryptid is going to be my favorite, and I really don't know what to think of those anymore. Like
Mhm.
how they're still around. I've run the gamut of a lot of different beliefs and
Mhm.
theories, and it's like the older you get, I don't know. It's I guess it's too broad for our final 10 minutes.
Right. Right. I think one of my favorite stories was from meeting Nancy Matz when at one time she lived in Arizona, And she said she was standing at this window. I think it was doing dishes, or she was by a window. It's her house, and she heard these heavy footsteps, and she looked up, and it was a T-Rex walking by.
Wow.
Where she actually that was the first and last dinosaur she ever saw. But she actually saw this T-Rex
And I
walking
mean,
by her window.
I'm guessing those are time distortions, or kind of
Mhm.
maybe animal ghosts sometimes.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anything is possible.
Do you think that the witches are able to create time distortions?
Maybe,
Mhm.
maybe. I mean, I think again, the witches of New Mexico were taught by their mothers and their grandmothers, and again,
Right.
they believed this ritual worked, and so it worked.
Mhm.
I don't think I had any stories like that in the book that I recall.
Mhm. Mhm. And they learned a lot. I mean, I had a friend that person that I knew that thought that they had activity in their house, and I remember the curanderas from here, California,
Hmm.
came out, and they had this thing with eggs in a jar, certain eggs, and the
Hmm.
eggs turn a certain way, and all this. It's a unique thing that they do.
Yeah, I mean, I put thought into that too. I thought, well, why would the egg turn black? I was like, okay,
Right.
it's a living embryo.
Mhm.
Uh, we as people can absorb other people's energy in a
Right.
way. So sure, a little egg with an embryo like that, I can see how it could absorb. And then people talk about, certain crystals and rocks can absorb things. And
Mhm.
I always get so thrown off by people who think that like crystal type stuff is pagan or it's scary or it's bad. It's like,
Mhm.
how? I mean,
Mhm.
I
Is it
used to
e-
be of that
yeah.
mindset, not really anymore. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Now, is it easy to locate a witch? Do you think?
No, not really. Maybe back then, but
Right.
not today. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when we did a live TV investigation of a old building here in Old Sacramento, and I remember I got called outside because the curanderas came.
Hmm.
And I asked them, and I said, I understand what you're doing, to rid this place of this, but can you wait till after after we
Yeah.
do the TV shoot? And they
Yeah.
were really good about it. In fact, they gave me sage and some other stuff, some other supplies. So they were really sweet
Yeah.
about it. But it's interesting when they do come on scene because it shocked me when they came on scene. I mean, I knew there were some in town, but I'd never come in contact with them, with the Aztecs. And they were, and I just thought, oh, that's really cool. So I sat out with them for a few hours, just watching
Yeah.
them while we were doing this shoot. So,
I am not a big fan of Western medicine anymore, especially with how
mhm,
much they charge. I would sooner go to a curandera than I would a real doctor for certain things.
mhm,
They're just so astronomically expensive, and they're really concerned more with like pumping you full of pills that they can sell
mhm,
you. And so I give a lot of stock to the curanderas and the shamans and all that.
mhm.
I think they know
Well,
where
I
it's
mean,
at.
the basis for a lot of this medication is herbs.
Yeah.
It's mint. It's different things. It's just our doctors and our pharmaceuticals keep adding stuff to it. But I mean, the basis of it all is still there.
Yes,
For
so the hypocrisy is so funny because to a lot of people, you
mhm,
know, there's this herbal witchcraft, but your supplements and your pills, that's all just the same thing. But you think it's okay to you because it came from my doctor and it came from Walmart. It's
right,
in this little box, but yeah, it's like I don't know. People just that's why they call it the Matrix.
right,
People just I don't know.
right. Out of all the books that you've written, what's your most favorite so far?
Well, I will. So I'll vouch for this one as my most scholarly book. It's got a lot of footnotes and notes, but I think it's
Mhm,
great for a casual reader who's just into the fun stuff. You just want to read paranormal stuff, or if you're like an anthropologist, a serious person who doesn't believe in this stuff.
mhm,
This is, again, lots of footnotes and notes. Very well. I documented it to the T. So on a scholarly level, this one might be my favorite right now. But my passion project is my novels.
okay.
So, Once
Well,
Upon a Time in Fort Sumner is about an aging Billy the Kid having to go back to Fort Sumner and face a skinwalker.
mhm.
The skinwalkers are actually a part of Fort Sumner, New Mexico, because that's where they unjustly sequestered the Navajo for several years.
Hmm.
So yeah, so my novels, my fiction, those are my books that do not sell. That's why I try to put them out there. The witch book sells really well.
I'm sure it
In
did. Yeah.
Albuquerque, Santa Fe, it sells incredibly well. But I mean, I'm trying to get these out there. So if you like fiction, if you like Tony Hillerman
Right.
or Clive Cussler, they're that sort of thing, you know. And I mean, if you like my nonfiction, you know, let's see how good of a fiction writer you think I am. So, once upon a time in Fort Sumter.
But people like that folklore stuff because I know
Mhm.
driving across, from coming from Ohio back to California, you get to New Mexico, you stop at the truck stops, and you stop at those little gift shops and stuff, and more often than not, there's a pit outside the gift shop where they have rattlesnakes,
Yes.
and then you get to drop the coin in there,
Yeah.
and if the snake eats it, it's good luck. And I remember that distinctly. I was only like 8 or 9 years old, but that really stuck out in
Yeah.
my head. I mean, that's the whole part of that folklore.
Yeah. Well, and that people can make themselves sick if they believe a certain way. Like they can make themselves ill. I mean, our
Hmm.
minds are very, very powerful, and you've got to be careful of that.
Right, right, right. Absolutely.
Because
So
that's
what's
why I
next?
say, yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna
So
say
what's
that I
next?
don't think, yeah, there's any such thing as witchcraft. It's just manifestation, and it's
Right,
either,
right, right.
yeah,
It makes a lot of sense, though. It does. Like that class I'm going to be teaching, well, not a class, but I'm going to try and do this meditation thing. Like I said in the beginning, you can meet your spirit guides and all this stuff, and that's part of
hmm, yeah,
manifestation too. There's a box in the library. Open it up. Look at the sheet of paper. See what it says on there. It's a manifestation thing.
yeah.
And so I'm going to be doing that. But yeah, I agree with you 100% where that's concerned. So what's next for you?
I've got a couple. I mean, I know we're about to close it out, but I did. This one is kind of similar to the witch book. It's sacred spots
Mm-hmm.
in New Mexico. So like Chocolate Canyon, Pecos Pueblo, uh, just places in New Mexico that have really interesting, unique histories to them. Three Rivers Petroglyph site's another one.
Cool.
So yeah, a little shorter. These are a
Yeah.
little more digestible.
Absolutely cool. Well, we're going to have to get you back on again. It's
I
always fun
love
to have you
talking to
on.
you, so I'd love to.
Okay, great, great, great. And how can people find you, sir?
I don't really do a fancy website. Just type in my name, John LeMay on Amazon, so LEMAY. Bunch of stuff will pop up. I also do film histories. Didn't talk about them here because they're not appropriate, but
Right.
yeah, do a lot of film histories too. But yeah, just John LeMay on Amazon, and you'll see all sorts of stuff.
All right, fair enough. Well, have a great rest of the night, and thank you so much for coming on.
You too. I enjoyed it.
Let's not wait so long next time, okay?
Okay.
Okay. All right, John. Have a good one. It's always fun to have him on, and learned a lot, right? Learned a lot. I know my grandmother was a bit of a healer, and she, like I said, she walked over from Mexico, so my backyard, mint growing everywhere, different herbs and stuff that she would make teas out of and things like that. My mother had a lot of memories of my grandmother, and the other ladies here in Sacramento praying and chanting over her and things like that when she was ill. Okay, tomorrow we're going to shift gears a little bit. Another Charlotte's coming on. Her name is Charlotte King, is going to be joining me. And she is able to predict earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, and other stuff via her body. She gets certain feelings in her body. She hears certain tones with with her ears, and she is able to predict this stuff. And she predicted Mount St. Helens when it erupted. She predicted it within 4 hours of the eruption. So she's going to be with me tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, the usual time. So I hope you guys can join me for that. Again, check around 10 o'clock tonight Pacific, and I will have those things that I talked about earlier, the psychic, re, the manifestations, right? The meditation psychic stuff. I'll have that up after 10 p.m. Pacific tonight. That's California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team meetup. All these sites, it's the same remembering them. And also, the Ghost Hunting 101 class. And we're going to be talking about, hopefully, tonight, the Creature Features guy have a movie up for Friday so I can get that teased up for you guys, too, for the watch party. Okay, if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're equal opportunity here, California Haunts Radio. So please be sure to share it and get the word out. You guys have been doing great stuff getting the word out for me, and we're growing. We're starting to grow. We're leaping, and we're growing, and I'm really excited. So I will see you guys tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific for Charlotte King, and we're going to be talking earthquake and volcano predictions. Have a great evening, everybody.